Hey everybody, Roman here, Pillar 6 College Planning. And like every Wednesday, we take apart some financial aid topic and help you as parents and your kids find money to pay for college, make it more affordable, and not have to go deep into debt to send your kids through college. And this is our Financial Aid Wednesdays. Welcome. For those of you who are joining us live, feel free to ask me any question. Or if I'm going too fast, ask me to slow down or spend a little more time talking about something that is really piquing your attention. And if you're watching a replay, you can also make the comments below. Whatever social media platform you're on, we're on Facebook, LinkedIn, and I think we might be on Instagram. So wherever you're watching this, if you've got a question, let us know and we'll get back to you. But this week's topic is a really, really big one. And it's one that I get probably the most questions about. And it's all about student loans, parent loans, college loans in general. And the biggest question that I get asked by parents is which loans should we take? And the biggest question I get asked by students is usually while they're in college or after they've graduated. And the question is, how do I get rid of these student loans? And so, big question or big questions, I should say. And let me just put that in the comments here. Which loans are best? That is a really good question. I don't know that there is the best kind of loan because at the end of the day, you're still going to have to borrow and pay somebody back. But if you must borrow, there are definitely better loans than others. In fact, there like pretty bad loans out there, and people get themselves into a really, really tough situation if they end up borrowing the wrong kind of loan. And this happens when kids do it. This also happens when parents do it for their kids. And so, if you are thinking about getting loans to pay for your kids' college, stay tuned because this is for you. And I guess the first thing I'd want to tell you is not surprisingly, cost of colleges have just skyrocketed. Well, you know this. What you might not have known is that cost of college has gone up twice as fast as average incomes have. And this is going back to 40 years. College prices have gone up about 170% in that time frame, while incomes went only up about 90. That's average. A lot of people's incomes were below that. But if you're the average income earner, you're in the middle class or higher middle income family in the US, then cost of college has gone up twice as fast as your incomes have, which means that it's just twice as hard for you to have saved for college, which is the reason why 86% of all families say that it is stressful to pay for college. 86% of all Americans sending their kids to college say it's really stressful for them to pay for college. That's the problem. Now, the solution is that we have a financial aid system in the US. In fact, we have three different financial aid systems. Most people know just about one, but there are, in fact, three. And 20 million people apply for the most common and the most well known financial aid every single year. 20 million people. Now, 84% of those people, overwhelming majority, expect to take loans because they don't think they're able to get free money to pay for college. And most of them don't even know exactly how much they're going to have to borrow. They just know that they will. Well, here's some interesting news for you as well. $150 billion is set aside every single year by the US government into the US Department of Education to be given away to people that have a need for financial assistance. 32 billion of that is in free money, grants and scholarships. And the rest of it, about 118 billion, is in loans and work study. Well, here's the interesting thing, that it's really unfortunate though. So it's interesting in a sad way, is that loans are at all times high. There's over $1.7 trillion as of today of outstanding student debt, making the Department of Education the second or third largest bank in the US by sheer volume of loans. And that student loan debt is growing 6 times faster than our economy. It's at this point the second largest debt category that people have next to their mortgages, which means people owe more money to the US government in student loans than they own to banks for financing their cars or credit card debt or any other kind of consumer debt. It is an epidemic. Now, while all of this is happening, of the $32 billion of free money, $2 billion goes unclaimed every single year. Think about that. $2 billion of free money, cash, is just sitting there, allocated every single year. And every year it goes unclaimed as people go to borrow more and more and more money. So here's what that results in. As of today, 43 million young people have student debt, and they owe an average of $37,000, which for a lot of people exceeds the amount of money that they actually earn per year after taxes, meaning that this debt is really holding them back. That's one of the reasons why young people are not getting married like they used to at the same ages. They're not buying homes because they can't afford to, and they're not getting, or they're not starting families again because they still have so much debt to pay off. They just can't afford to do all the things that young people would like to have done, and perhaps one could argue should be doing. And that's not where all the bad news ends. Because unfortunately, in addition to young people that own debt, over 3 million Americans 60 years of age and older have student debt. Now, some of this debt is still left over from their own education, but most of it is the student debt that they've co-signed or taken out for their kids. And they owe several $billion in outstanding debt. And the problem is that's the kind of student debt that can never be discharged or negotiated or gotten rid of unless you paid back. And so, as these people go to retire, guess what? They're having a harder and harder time paying off these debt or these student loans for their kids. And if they don't pay them off, the government's just going to send them a really big tax bill. That's number one. Number two, it's going to withhold their tax returns. Actually, not tax returns, excuse me. It's going to withhold their tax refunds. Number three, can garnish your wages. And number four, if you don't have any wages because you're looking to retire, they can withhold your Social Security benefits or other government benefits. How do you like that? And that's one of the reasons why student debt is so incredibly challenging for so many people. And so before you go to borrow, please do your homework. Understand which loans are better than others and which loans you need to avoid like the plague. So I'm going to talk about that right now. And for those of you who just want a quick little cheat sheet, we have a student loan checklist that's available, absolutely no cost. It helps to summarize the best loans that you should be looking at first, pretty good loans that you would consider if you still need to borrow, and then really bad loans you need to avoid so you don't fall into the same traps that millions of people fall into every single year. And before I tell you that, and by the way, if you want that, just put checklist in the comments below and I'll send it to you. You can also go to our website. That's pillar6college.com, pillar6college.com. And there will be that checklist probably on the homepage or in the free section. You'll find it. It's there. But here's one thing that a survey of all these millions of kids that own student loans, as well as their parents, here's what they said. 78% of them said they would have researched more scholarships instead of taking on the debt. 75% of them said they would have chosen a different school. The reason they say this is because while the government qualifies you for financial aid, they leave it up to colleges to actually give the financial aid out. And some colleges give a lot more financial aid than others. They don't have all the same financial aid policies. And oftentimes, kids and their parents select colleges without thinking about the financial part of it. And so they end up choosing colleges that were a good fit for their student, but they were a really bad fit for them financially because those colleges just don't have any money to give. And as a result, they got stuck with loans. And if those 75% of the folks had chosen a different school, they would have found another college that would have been an equally good fit for their student, but it would also have given them enough money to pay for college with ease without having to go deep into debt. 30% of all those people who borrowed a lot of money said they would have reached out to financial aid office. Well, hindsight is always 2020. This is something I tell families all the time. Whenever your student gets into college in their senior year, they're going to get a financial aid award letter. It's a financial aid packet that each college that accepts them offers. in order to, incentivize your student to go there. And I always tell families to never accept the first offer they get because the first offer is hardly their best offer and it's definitely not the final, especially if you have a reason to appeal and negotiate for more aid. Now, there are four different types of financial aid appeals that you can use, and we teach you how to do that. By the way, I've got some videos on that. You feel free to go back and look through some of our videos on YouTube or on this channel right here, or you can always just drop it in the comments below and say, I'd like to get the video with how to negotiate and appeal for more financial aid, and we'll send it to you. And then 11% of all those people said they would have looked at different loan options because the loans that they got stuck with were toxic and made them very difficult for them to pay it off. And so that's what I want to talk to you about right now. Because at the end of the day, the reality is because colleges have gone up in price faster than our ability to save for college, most families are going to have to borrow. And the reality is that when you look at the American households that send their kids to college, we're kind of fall into one of three general categories. Right? We've got the lower income category, and those folks generally qualify for financial aid without having to do anything too fancy because, well, their incomes are really low. Then the second category of people that has the largest number of households are those that fall into that middle bracket. They're kind of a lower income to the upper middle income families. Now, they're not going to qualify for all the financial aid they might need, but they'll get some. And then the third category are those families that have all the money that they would need. They can just write the check and they won't miss it. Well, as it so happens, the very top, the financial profile of families that can just write the check and not miss it is pretty small, just like the very bottom portion of low income earners that live below poverty line and are sending their kids to college. That's also pretty low. The majority of people, like 90+% of us, fall into this weird category in the middle where we're not going to get enough money from the government to just automatically make college affordable, but we still need money. We need help. And we usually only know of the one financial aid system. Like I said, there are four, but there are three really, really big ones. Again, we have a lot of videos on that. So if you want those, just let me know that that's what you want to watch and we'll send it to you. But the reality is that the majority of these 90+% of the US households that send their kids to college, you're going to have to borrow something. And you need to figure out which loans are going to be good for you and which loans you need to avoid because some of those are pretty bad and some are spectacularly bad. And I'll tell you which ones to avoid. So, again, for those of you that are just tuning in, if you want a student loan checklist, just put checklist in the comments below. We'll send it to you or go to our website and you can download it for free. But think of it this way, all loans break down into two categories. There's either a student loan that's available to the student, and then there is the second student loan category available to the parents. That's the easiest way that you can look at it. Now, each one of these two different types of loans can be borrowed from three different resources. You have government loans, you have private loans, and then you have other loans. So, what do I mean by that? Well, government loans are the ones that you or your student can borrow directly from the federal government. I'll talk about more of those loans in a moment. But the second category are private loans. Private loans are those available through banks or credit unions and financial institutions that are for profit. And then the third category are all of the other loans. Those could be credit cards, home refinancing, home equity lines. Some people will borrow against their investment accounts, whether they're brokerage accounts or retirement accounts. And yes, believe it or not, a lot of people will finance their kids' college on a credit card. In fact, some kids will finance part of their college on a credit card. I was a knucklehead that paid for college to some part with my credit cards and got me into some pretty spectacular trouble when I graduated because an 18-year-old doesn't understand what 14% interest can do to you and what a credit report is and what a credit score is. And so when, we go out into the world, get our first jobs, and then we want to rent an apartment or buy a car or buy, a refrigerator that we don't have money for and we need to finance it. And all of a sudden, we very quickly begin to realize that all of those banks are not keen on giving us money when we're eyeballs deep into debt already and we can barely pay off those high interest loans. So, this is one of the biggest reasons that, like I said, 80 some percent of the kids that graduate college wish they would not have borrowed as much as they did. So, let's avoid that. Let's make sure that you don't have to borrow more than you can afford to pay. Make sure that your kids don't have to start their lives digging themselves up out of a deep hole of debt. So, the best type of loans that you should look at and you should take if you need it would be loans from the government. By far, before you take loans from a private institution that is for profit, look at government loans first. Now, remember what I said earlier. Government loans are made to students and it's also made to parents. And while you might think that those loans are the same, they are not. So be careful when borrowing from the government. Here's what you should keep in mind first. Students can borrow at a much, much better terms than parents can. Students' loans also have a lot better protections, which is good. Student loans also have a cap on the interest rate, which is also good. And those interest rates are lower than what private banks will charge. So if you have to borrow, first get student loans from the government. And there's two types. There is a subsidized student loan, and then there's the unsubsidized student loan. The difference are pretty big and important. The subsidized loan is the best kind of loan that you can get. So let me just say this fully. A subsidized student loan from the federal government is the best kind of loan you can get. And here's why. Because it's from the government, they have a lot of protections, meaning that when they graduate or even during college, if they have a hard time, those loans can be paused. And because it's subsidized, the Department of Education pays the interest. Basically, the government is paying the interest, and you have a interest-free loan for 4 years or 5 years that your student is in college. And that's awesome because if they borrow, say, $27,000, which is the limit that you can borrow from the government, then a big chunk of that will have zero interest for the time that they're in college. Now, when they graduate, if they can't find a great paying job, then they can do something called a repayment plan that's a percentage of their income. It's income based. So it's easier for them to start paying off a little bit every month. And as they earn more money, they'll pay off more and more and more. And at some point, hopefully, get rid of it completely. But they also have these deferrals. For example, if your student can't find a job, they can pause payments on their loans. And yes, they will continue growing with interest, but at least they're not going to have to make the payments and go into default and ruin their credit history, like I did when I graduated college because I did some private loans and credit cards. So, student loans from the government, especially if they're subsidized, is the best place for you to start. Now, the question I get is, well, how do we get those loans? Well, you get those loans by filling out the FAFSA and actually applying to the government for financial aid. And it doesn't matter what your income is, if you think you don't make enough money or if you think you make too much money. Everybody should fill out the FAFSA because that's how you become sort of registered and you go on the radar, you go on notice to the government to say, I'm looking for money to pay for college. And if you don't get the money that you were looking for, if you don't get the subsidized student loan from the colleges when they're actually accepted, well, you can go back and ask them. Just do a financial aid appeal and say, we really need more help. and we'd like to borrow some student loans that are subsidized. So, again, there are four different ways to negotiate with colleges for more money. Let me know in the comments below if you want those videos, or just send me an email or direct message me and we'll send them to you. And if you've got questions, drop them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them as we go along. So, that's student loans. But like I said a little earlier, student loans are capped, meaning that there's a limit to how much students can actually borrow from the federal government. And so when you need to borrow more money, the government will say to the parent, hey, guess what? You can borrow money and there is no limit. So here's an example. Let's say your student gets accepted to one of these very expensive Ivy League private colleges that costs $80,000 all in tuition, room and board, books, supplies, the whole thing. 80 grand. And let's say you don't get enough free money to pay for college. Your student can only borrow $5,500, leaving the rest of this, what is it, $74,500 to be financed or for you to pay. And if you don't have that money, the government's going to say, would you like to borrow it, mom and dad? And they can give you a virtually unlimited loan directly from the government that makes people feel pretty good about it because they think, well, my kids are getting a good loan. They've heard good things about loans from the government. And so they just automatically assume that the same terms apply to them. That's not true. Parent loans from the government are very, very, very different than student loans from the government. They don't have the same protections, they don't have the same benefits, and they can never be discharged, which means once you go in debt to the US government, they're going to get their money one way or another. If you don't pay off your loans, they can withhold your wages. They can withhold your tax refunds. They can withhold your employment benefits, or sorry, not employment, but government benefits like unemployment. They can also withhold your Social Security payments. So, one way or another, they'll get their money. And if you, as a parent, ever run into some financial hardships when you can't pay things off, you can't even discharge them through bankruptcy because loans to the government will always stand. So, if you're a parent of a student who needs to borrow for college, please be very, very careful with something called Parent Plus loans. When you get your financial aid award letters, it will be, or if you see it on the letter, it will always say the word plus on it. Sometimes it's abbreviated. Call financial aid office and confirm. Because if you're being offered a Parent Plus loan, please do not borrow any more than you are confident that you can pay back with ease. Because otherwise, you're going to get stuck with it and you can never get rid of it unless you pay it off. Now, if you have to borrow as a parent, before you take any Parent Plus loans from the government, I actually recommend you look at other loans first, even before you look at private loans through banks and credit unions. The problem with those other private loans is that, well, for one, it's on your credit report. So if you decide that you need to finance something else in your life, cars, homes, whatever, well, that's going to be registered on your credit report. And you might not be able to get additional loans that you may need that are very, very meaningful to you and your family because you've already borrowed. The second thing is those the interest payments are usually kind of high, or interest rates are high. And they're not capped, meaning that banks can change the amount of interest that they charge you year to year. If they end up having some financial hardships or inflation's up like it is now and interest rates are increasing, well, they can charge you 14% interest like I had when I was in college. And that can get debilitating and crushing. So avoid those. But look at other loans. If you own a home, consider borrowing from your equity or getting a home equity line of credit. Again, look, this is not me giving you financial advice that you should run out and refinance your home, but I'm hoping to encourage you to think about it and think about borrowing in a more creative way so that it's going to be more positive for you. Because home loans are at all-time interest lows, and that's a good thing. Why not take advantage of that? Now, the one thing I will tell you is that a lot of families end up borrowing from their retirement plans. Um, Actually, let me pause here. Barbara, I see you asked for those other videos. Let me know which videos you actually want because I realized at this point I've talked about a few. I think I talked about the negotiations or the financial aid appeals. We talked about other sources of financial aid. So just let me know in the comments below which one you want. And Sean, hey, good to see you again. I know you're on these calls often. I hope you're getting a lot of value from this. Um, you completed the FAFSA and received a 4-digit EFC. Is that okay? Um, well, since you did get the FAFSA checklist, you're going to get the question answered, but I'll answer it here now. I don't know exactly what the 4-digit EFC that you got, but I can tell you that 4 digits means you're expected to pay between 1,000, right? Because that's one comma and then three zeros, to 9,999. And so connect with me, and we'll figure out if it's the right thing or it's the right EFC. But good to see you nonetheless. I'm sure we'll talk soon. All right. So let's go back. And where was I? Man, I keep losing my train of thought today. Oh, I remember. I was going to give you a fair warning about not borrowing from retirement. So a lot of families will come to us after the fact, after they've sort of exhausted the financial aid offer they were getting and they realized they need more money. They didn't really know how to appeal and negotiate with colleges for more money. So they just did what they thought they should have done, which is they go deep into retirement. So they will literally cash out some of their retirement savings. And that's one of the worst things that anyone can do for a number of reasons. Number one, every dollar that you take out of your retirement plan before you are eligible to take money out of your retirement plan, you're going to pay a 10% penalty to the IRS. That's the first thing. You lose 10% of your money right up front. Number two, every dollar that comes out of your retirement plan is going to be reported as ordinary income, which does what? Well, it triggers an additional tax. So, depending on what your tax rate is, you could be losing another 20 or 30% of that. So now you're maybe 40% down from where you were. Then you end up having to report that additional money that you've taken out of your retirement plan as income. So that next year, when you apply for financial aid, it will be reduced by the fact that your income just went up, even though you didn't earn any more money. You just took it out of your savings. But the colleges, when they look at that tax return, they'll see it as income and it's going to reduce your financial aid eligibility for the future. So it hurts you in those three ways. But the fourth thing that really hurts the most is that now you don't have that money in your retirement plan. And that one day when you actually want or need to stop working, you're going to need money to be able to retire. And guess what? There is no financial aid for retirement. And you really need to take care of yourself first. As counterintuitive as it might be to a parent to take care of themselves first, you absolutely need to consider that when you're thinking about taking money out of your retirement. Now, some folks will say, I know that. I'm not going to liquidate my retirement savings and lose 40 to 50% of that money, to taxes and to penalties. I know better. I just took a loan against my 401k. All right, well, that's better, but it's still bad. It's better because you don't have to pay tax and you don't have to pay the penalties. But here's what happens. Number one, when you take that money out of your retirement plan, now you don't have money actually growing and earning you interest. So the amount of money that your retirement is going to grow by is going to be lower. But number two, and this is probably more important for you to remember, and that is if you change jobs, if you get laid off, or if you choose to leave voluntarily for whatever reason, and you have a loan on your 401k, that 401k company is going to require that you pay it off right away before you separate from employment or very, very shortly thereafter. If you don't pay off that loan, it automatically, like that, gets reported to the government as a distribution. So now you're adding insult to injury because now you have interest that you had to pay on the loan that you took. Now you're going to have to pay the 10% penalty. You're going to have to pay income taxes on the money that you're not paying back. And that's how folks just look at their retirement nest egg shrink for nothing, for no reason whatsoever, just because they're supporting the US government in additional taxes. So please do not borrow from your retirement. Please don't liquidate your retirement money. If you have to borrow, please borrow from the government through your kids. And there's a reason why they're limited in how much they can borrow. And that's because government knows that you shouldn't go too deep into debt. So don't be like 43 other million of Americans that have overborrowed and are having a really hard time paying it back. Try to get free money instead. But if you must borrow, subsidized student loan from the government is your best bet. Second, unsubsidized student debt from the federal government is your second best. Third, as a parent, look at some creative ways to borrow. Leverage maybe your home equity if you've got it, personal loans, whatever the case might be, something that doesn't wreck your credit history, something that you can actually negotiate or discharge or pay back with more flexible terms. And if you don't have enough access to loans that are favorable, I hate to say it, but that means you shouldn't borrow. You really shouldn't. Just stop and talk to your kids about picking a college that's actually going to be affordable for them. And the last thing I'll mention is this. Remember that not all colleges give financial aid the same. Some give more, some give less. Some give better financial aid, some give worse financial aid. But the worst deal financially that you can get on a college is to send your kid, I shouldn't say your kid, your student, your child, your son or daughter. The worst thing that you can do financially is to send your student to an out of state school. You know why? Because state colleges don't really have a lot of money to give. They're funded by the government. It's not like they've got millions of dollars set aside in their endowment funds that they can just give you or just reduce their tuition. They're highly, highly regulated and they don't have any money of their own. So every year, they depend on the government to give them an allocation of money to then give out to students. And remember, most colleges get some amount of free money and a bunch of student loans or parent loans. So I digress. State colleges don't have money. And if you send your student to an out of state college, then not only are you not going to get a lot of financial aid, but you're going to be paying a private like price because out of state schools charge a price that sometimes is twice as much as the same cost for an in state student. Like your kids are getting the same education and you're paying twice as much. Where's the value in that? If you consider how you look for good deals, college is no different. You're trying to get as much as you can and pay as little as you can, right? You want to find a great college on sale. Well, there are no Black Friday sales for really good colleges, but there are great ways to get free money to help you pay for college and reduce your out of pocket cost. That's kind of like getting college on sale, and that's what you should be working towards. But don't borrow because you're just financing your college education or your kids' college education, and it's going to cost you even more. So, out of state schools are the worst financial deal that you can get on college. If you're going to get ready to pay or at least consider paying 40, 50, $60,000, then at least send them to a private school that has a bunch of money in their endowments because there you can go back to them and actually ask for them to give you more money. You've got nothing to lose. They'll either give it to you or they don't. And if they do, that's awesome. That lowers the amount that you have to pay. But if you send your student to an out of state school and it's 45,000 instead of 25,000, they can't reach into their pockets to give you free money. They're just going to give you loans. So I think we've covered that topic in enough detail. I know you might have some other questions about which loans are best. We have a checklist. If you want it, let us know in the comments below. Go to our website and it'll be there for you for free to download. And if you've got personal questions or if you want to know how to get more debt-free money first, without having to start off looking for loans, again, let us know. We've got some awesome free videos and checklists that you can use to start looking for money to pay for college. And the last thing I'll mention, I know I've said this many times, this is, I promise, the last thing I'll mention. Don't wait until the last minute. A lot of families make the mistake of waiting until their kids are seniors, applying to colleges, or after they get into colleges to start thinking about financial aid. And if that's you, good news, bad news. Good news is you probably still have time to do a little bit better than you could have or than you can. But the bad news is a lot of those savings opportunities are already past. And so you only really have to think about year two, three, and four. But if you have a younger student in high school, freshman, sophomore, junior, pay attention to this right now. Start learning where the money is, how you can get money from the financial aid system, and which financial aid system you're going to use. Again, there's four of them. I promise you, regardless of how much money you make, regardless of how much money you have, regardless of any other personal circumstances that you think are unique to you, I promise you that if you need help paying for college, you can find money to help you pay for college. So I'm going to leave you with that thought as a positive one. Everybody can find money to pay for college. You just have to know where to look and what to do to get it. But the one thing that you all have in common, don't wait until the last minute. The more time you give yourself, the more money you will find. I guarantee it. So I wish you all well, stay healthy. Crazy time we're living through again. And good luck to you all. If you got questions or comments, drop them in the comments below. If you're liking this, if it's helpful, give me a thumbs up so I know that this is helping you. And share with your friends that might have kids going to college that don't know about this. And happy to send more of your kids to college debt free and help them get started in life with a foot forward as opposed to having to dig themselves out of debt. All right. On that note, I'll talk to you all later. Thanks for watching. Talk to you soon. Bye.